Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and joining us. Welcome to Brussels and to the 2025 UEC Football Forum. My name is Pien Meulensteen, and I am very excited to be your host today. Before we begin, I must mention as well, there will be translation from English to Spanish and Spanish to English as well. There's headphones available at your seats. Channel 1 for English, Channel 2 for Spanish. So it's really great to be surrounded by so many people who care about the future of our game. More than 200 of you registered for today's event, including 160 clubs represented and delegates from more than 30 countries, which makes this our biggest UEC event yet. I'd also like to take this moment to extend a special warm welcome to our club and league representatives from Ukraine who have joined us here today in Brussels. Well, the UEC was founded on a simple but powerful idea that every football club in Europe deserves a voice, from the world's most successful teams to aspiring community-based clubs, that from the heartbeat of Europe's towns and cities, we are part of the same story, and we all share the same dream. The UEC exists for a reason: to reward development, to protect balance, and to support football's social value. So throughout the day, we'll hear from a variety of voices, including leading experts in law and policy, the UEC President, the European Commissioner for Sport, and a broad range of teams and leagues. This is a place where different views are welcome, debated and respected, where perspectives come together to build something stronger, fairer, and more sustainable. For me, this event is very special because I was very lucky to grow up in a footballing family. My dad was dedicated to developing players from around the world, which eventually led him to becoming first-team coach at Manchester United under Sir Alex Ferguson. My younger brother is a professional footballer as well, and this season he's featuring in the Europa League with Go Ahead Eagles. And for me, I work as a football presenter and commentator on TV in the UK for both domestic and international tournaments. So I know that football is not just a sport. I see how it inspires communities and brings people together. Football now finds itself at a turning point. The choices we make in the next few years will shape not just competitions and football finance, but also the values of the game itself. If we listen, collaborate, and act, we can build a future that works for everyone. So thank you very much for being here. It will be a great day. And remember, together we can shape the future of European football. It is now time to introduce our first very special guest. As President of the Union of European Clubs and President of Brussels' very own Union Saint-Gilloise, Alex Muzio has been part of the forefront of reimagining what sustainable success in football looks like. He guided a club with one of the most inspiring stories in Europe to the Belgian Pro League title last season, and his advocacy for greater fairness and representation across the continent means he has become a key voice for change in football governance. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Alex Muzio.
Thanks, man. Hi, everyone. My job here is to welcome you. I'm very proud to welcome you to the UEC Football Forum 2025. Whether you're a new face or whether you're a familiar ally in the fight for football, you're very welcome here today, and I hope you have a great time. We'll have panels discussing governance and fairness, as well as speeches from big hitters like Javier Tebas and Micallef. So why are we all here? We're here to shine a spotlight on the broken governance that exists within European football at the moment. We're here to showcase why the UEC is important and why we are here to inspire and offer solutions and policies and perspectives that can make improvements and make things better. Ever since the UEC was born, we felt strong support from the EU institutions, and that has continued to this day. At the moment, we've never felt more support, including from Glenn, the Commissioner for Sport. Today, he will give a speech, and we're very excited to hear what he has to say. When we presented our player development reward policy to him, he was extremely enthusiastic about how it can help grow and develop talent in Europe with fair compensation for the clubs that do so. The player development reward policy has been public for some time, and we've had incredibly positive feedback from numerous stakeholders. We have had some feedback and we've listened and made some tweaks, and we'd be delighted if this policy would be enacted. But unfortunately, what we've had back from the stakeholder environment as well has been also a good example of the governance. We've been told that the time is not right. The time is not now. It's not, the cycle 24-27. We're in the middle, but yet not told when the time would be, who would be involved, what the stakeholders would have to say. It's just wait. Just wait. That seems to be the message. I have no doubt that the ECA will be involved in those discussions, but not the 95% of the members that have no vote and no say, no voice. Just the 5% that matter. Just the important ones. It should be noted, though, that those other 95%, they just had an amazing time in Rome. What a party. I've heard Rome was a very apt place for such a party. Estimated cost, 7 million euros of the club's money. Those CEOs love to go because, for once, they're treated like the stars, not those idiot footballers who run around on the pitch. Hopefully, they can impress someone and get out of the ghastly subdivision 4D and make their way up to 3C next year, where they get the premium bar, the premium spirits, and maybe a bronze lanyard. No vote, though, but that'll come. Just give it time. Just give it time. Work their way up a few more subdivisions first. You may think I'm being cynical, but is there any real world in which the majority or even a significant minority of ECA teams would want a Club World Cup? A Club World Cup that gives money to the biggest cartel clubs and keeps away money from all the rest. The Club World Cup is an amazing example of how FIFA has moved up a notch from the era of Sepp Blatter. I find it incredible, having lived through the Sepp Blatter regime, having lived through books, documentaries about their shenanigans, having seen at Bar Ol Lac the white sheets covering the faces while they're being arrested, that you could possibly hark back to that era. And while I'm not going that far, the fact that it's even in the conversation is quite an incredible state of play. I don't want to get into global affairs, but I feel that these days, FIFA is much more interested in the tactics of politicians than those of Pep Guardiola or Arne Slot. When they announced the Club World Cup, they announced a, quote, substantial and groundbreaking global solidarity model. They described it as unprecedented. They announced that they had a target of $250 million for this solidarity over and over again, so many times that by the end, the media quoted the 250 million as if it were a fact. Unfortunately, it's not a fact. Since that Club World Cup, it should be noted that all the participants have been paid their prize money. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have turned up, as you may have noted from the conversations around Real Madrid at the time. But the solidarity, not heard anything about it. So I guess it's on to the next topic to distract. Maybe a peace prize? Maybe at the next FIFA press conference, which, judging by the timeline, will probably be at the next Club World Cup. So, look, I'm talking about the Club World Cup a lot, but it really did hit the full house of, on the bingo card of terrible governance. Wildcard team added on a whim because Lionel Messi plays for them. And I do really like Lionel Messi, just to be clear. Calendar trampled on without any real consultation. The ECA claiming to have new, real, transparent governance, but no idea who voted, when they voted, how they voted, what they voted for, dynamic pricing and ticketing, and the cartel clubs distancing themselves from the rest after, as already mentioned, threatening to not play if they didn't get paid quite enough money. Mythical populist promises around solidarity, and then, of course, along with the discussion before about the tactics of politicians, talking about it being the greatest competition in football history over and over again while stadiums were 80% empty. I think it's important to note at this point that some people will really think that this is what the people want. People want the elitist, the cartel clubs to dominate relentlessly. They don't want fair competition. That's why on FC 26, everyone picks all the biggest teams with all the fastest players. That's what some people want. And we're not the thought police. If that's what you want to think, That's no problem. You have the ECA for that as well. We at the UEC are trying to offer an alternative. At a recent stakeholder meeting, I was challenged and told, quote, "You just want to take money from the biggest teams," end quote. Well, unfortunately, yes. At the moment, the biggest teams receive far too much money and have far too much turnover. The gap between them and the rest is only growing. We don't pretend at the UEC to have a magical money tree. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so challenging for us to sustainably fund our limited activities. Sorry to say there's no 7 million budget for today. I am concerned that with this mentality, the cartel teams will continue to grow and grow and grow. In April 2021, there were significant protests around the idea that the elitist clubs would take their ball and go and play with themselves and not play with anyone else. At that time, they backed down and they came back to earth and played with all the rest of our normal clubs. I am concerned that in the medium to long term, though, it will be seen as merciful that they will not continue to grow bigger, better, and smash all the other teams to bits. And when that happens, that will be a very sad day for all of us. I've already talked a bit about our player development reward policy. There is another policy that I will present today around the media rights space, which is becoming an increasingly hot topic in European football. I feel like people have been talking about streaming taking over since the advent of the internet. Now, it's a very complicated topic, but for the national associations 20 and below, there's always been a desire to have the must-have league, the must-have games on a platform. And those games were not, at that time, traditionally, those leagues. They were the Champions League or one of the big four leagues. I worry that that is now extending all the way up to National Association 5, where the must-have league, the must-have thing to buy in football is no longer the National Association between those two numbers, 5 and 20. And when that happens, the significant stable part of those teams' budgets will no longer be there. And everyone will have to chase to get to the top, to get to the UEFA rights. And when that happens, sustainability will really, really struggle because the revenue gap, the revenue divide will be so massive that not making Europe will suddenly be massively loss-making. That's a big problem. It's a really big problem. It will be compounded by the greed of the biggest teams in those national associations, demanding more and more of the pie as time goes on. Traditionally, it was much harder to separate out why people were signing up for their domestic leagues. But once you put it on a streaming platform and you notice that everyone is watching the biggest team in those leagues, they will fight for more and more money. They will not fight for less money in the Champions League, where they're the small fish. They will only fight for more in their own domestic league. And that's the background to the policy that will be presented to you later. Now, what are our options? What's available? The UEC has always believed in dialogue first, but dialogue must lead to change. Coming up in the panels is a discussion of the law as it pertains to European football. Ultimately, if governance in football continues to breach the principles of EU law, then we and others will have no choice but to seek remedies through the European institutions. No one could argue that we'll have been anything but patient if it comes to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. So our first panel explores now how European law is reshaping football governance and what that means for fairness, competition and representation. The conversation will bring together some of Europe's leading legal minds to examine just how well football's current governing structures align with EU principles of transparency and balance. Please welcome our moderator, Ali Walker of Politico Europe, Damien Nevin from the Graduate Institute of Geneva. They are joined by speakers Petros Mavroidis from Columbia Law School and Miguel Maduro, former Advocate General at the European Court of Justice and Professor at Lisbon's Católica School of Law. Thank you.
You go in the middle.
Go in the middle.
No, you go, Damien.
No, you go in the middle.
Okay.
Thank you, Pien, for the introduction. As we heard there, the heart of this debate is how decisions are made on a governance level in football. We have representatives here today from domestic leagues, from clubs, from band groups, many people who argue that the current situation gives disproportionate influence to a small group of elite clubs, sidelining the majority across European football. In that perspective, it shapes who gets access to competitions, how revenues are distributed, and ultimately how fair or unfair the current system may be. So I'll come to you in a second, Miguel, to maybe set the scene on some of that. And actually, as many people might remember from 2023, at this same forum, you correctly predicted the outcome of the European Super League verdict by the Court of Justice.
It wasn't too hard.
Would you say in the 2 years since that the key elements of that ruling have been implemented and addressed? And how can EU institutions ensure that football governance does respect the same legal principles as other economic activity in the EU?
Okay, the first thing that I want to make clear is because sometimes I see some people misreading the judgment of the Court of Justice. The judgment of the Court of Justice is not about the Super League. It's about the role of UEFA as a gatekeeper for competitions and the systemic conflict of interest that exists between UEFA at the same time deciding what competitions exist in European football and how they are organized and the rules under which they take place on the one hand, and at the same time being an economic actor, an operator in that market, almost the single or the dominant operator in that market. And that is what concerned the court. The court in no way validated a closed league. The Super League itself, at least with the model that was proposed, would arguably, in my view, be contrary to EU competition law itself. I think this is very important because sometimes people see the judgment as validating or supporting a Super League. It's not at all about that. It's about the extent to which, for UEFA to exercise that role as the gatekeeper for European competitions and the regulator of European competitions, it needs to do so according to certain rules, a framework of decision, as the court put it, that we can describe as a set of good governance rules in order to prevent the risks of conflicts of interest that emerge between that double capacity of UEFA as an economic actor in the market on the one hand, and as the regulator and gatekeeper of that market on the other hand. And what the court established was a set of principles that including non-discrimination and objective criteria, that in order to license and limit the type of competition events that UEFA could authorize, it needed to be guided by certain principles, including principles of solidarity in football. And I think in all of these aspects, UEFA has not complied with it. I mean, we can discuss it. I've written an article, a paper that's coming out as an article too recently, where I address in particular certain aspects of the governance of European competitions and its impact on terms of competitive imbalance and encroachment. But on that specific aspect, for example, the Memorandum of Understanding with ECA, that is now EFC, clearly violates what the court says in the Super League, because all the clubs, ECA, on behalf of all its clubs, or EFC now, I think it's EFC now, the new, the EFC former ECA, basically commits on behalf of all other clubs not to compete and not to accept to compete in any other competition but the competition organized by UEFA. Clear violation of the principle of non-discrimination that the court had established on the Super League judgment. And then, as I've also, and I think the work of Damien and Petros on another paper that they've been working and which we have cooperated, demonstrates, if anything, the current structure of European competitions does not promote solidarity, does not promote competitive balance. On the contrary, is leading to greater encroachment and competitive imbalance. And this also undermines the conditions that the court imposes as necessary to accept for UEFA to continue to play the role as a gatekeeper and regulator of this market. And to that extent, I think it's pretty clear that UEFA has not at all complied with the conditions that the court established in the Super League judgment.
So to come back to the second part of the question, do you think there's something EU institutions should be doing to
oh, yes.
ensure that?
Very much so. I'm surprised they haven't done it already. And I think there's a vicious cycle that explains why they haven't done it, but we can talk about that. What is the elements of political economy that explain why, from my perspective, such serious governance flaws in the organization of football, not only in Europe, but beyond, and moreover, their impact in terms of what is usually called the European sports model, that is extremely negative, including increased encroachment. That is, European competitions increasingly work as almost as closed competitions with a stable pool of incumbents on the one hand, and decreased competitive balance. It is surprising that in the presence of this and the link between these governance rules and these effects, that European institutions don't do anything about it. But to give you two very clear examples of patent violations of EU law that one can see, for example, in the Memorandum of Understanding between UEFA and EFC before ECA. One is the one that the non-competitive that I've mentioned, and the other one is there is a clause there whereby all ECA, again EFC, on behalf of all the clubs, commit not to go to court to defend their rights. That is, commit not to benefit from the principle of effective judicial protection of EU law, not to make use of EU law. I mean, it's something that's more violating, that there is a rule there, an anti-suit rule, clearly contrary to EU law, and nothing is done in that respect. Then there is the deeper question of the extent to which giving that exclusive role of representation to EFC in football on the part of UEFA is itself a violation of EU competition law. I think it is because two fundamental reasons. The first one, it gives to a particular pool of incumbents in the market for European competitions an exclusive role in shaping the rules under which those competitions are going to work. That market is going to work. And from my point of view, that's even a restriction by object in terms of what we describe as competition law. But in addition to that, and again, this I will refer back to Damien and Petro's paper, this is then demonstrated empirically by increased evidence of the encroachment and competitive imbalance. But this exclusive representation also has another consequence. That is, I've read, I was hearing Alex Muzio talking about how many presidents went to the EFC event a few weeks ago. I think I remember I was in the United States. And I read even in the American press and some of the sports press, the statements of some journalists that were saying, but it's incredible. I mean, we have these medium-sized clubs and small clubs, and they are applauding their own demise. They are not ordinary members. They have no vote. They have no influence. I mean, only a small group of teams actually have a right to vote. And within those teams, an even smaller group of teams controls the executive board of ECA. Why do these clubs accept this? That's a question I often hear. Well, the reason is because this memorandum gives EFC exclusive rights of representation. The choice this gives to clubs is either you accept the rules of ECA, either you accept the rules that are shaped by this elite of clubs, and you have almost no voice, but at least you have a saying and you get to go to some parties, or you have nothing. That's basically what it is. Or you have nothing. And that's why another aspect from my point of view of this memorandum that is clearly leading to the current status quo in terms of control of European competitions and to these anti-competitive effects.
Yeah. Thank you, Miguel. I'm going to bring in Petros just now, who I assume is going to turn up on a screen behind us. So Petros, some concerns have been raised, often by fans, but also by other key stakeholders in European football about the evolution of competitive balance that we've been talking about. What's your perspective on that evolution, and what do you think are the things that have contributed to a potentially negative trend in competitive balance?
Well, first of all, let me say I'm very sorry I'm not there with you, with Damien and Miguel and my dear friend David Frommer, who's in attendance. But the semester is not over here in New York, so I have to stay here for a few more weeks. Let me start by saying that the benchmark can only be European law. There is no doubt that following 40 years of jurisprudence, EU law trumps UEFA statutes. Now, as Miguel said very correctly, one element that the court has consistently underlined is the dual nature of UEFA as entrepreneur and regulator. And the point that the court makes, drives home consistently, is that UEFA cannot exploit its regulatory prerogative to advance its commercial interests. That much is clear. Now, I want to add just one thing here. The court is particularly insisting on this point. It even leaned on a provision of the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union concerning enterprises, it likened UEFA with enterprises with special privileges, and imposed on UEFA the obligation to avoid the scenario I just described. Now, what is the task of UEFA against this background? Well, we don't have to go far. UEFA's self-assigned task is, I'm the protector of the European sports model, promotion, relegation on merits, and the pyramidal structure of European football. Fine. Has UEFA promoted, has it lived up to its task? Let me put it this way. And the short answer is no. And it's not just an affirmation, it's data that led me to this conclusion, and my work that Miguel referred to with Damien, but also with Luca Zerman, an Italian econometrician, is particularly telling in this respect. And in our view, the tipping point was the move to the use of the league coefficient as the decisive criterion for participation in European competitions. Now, what has happened through this move? Well, UEFA not only did not promote marriage, but in fact went the other way, undermined whatever competitive balance, or one dimension of whatever competitive balance existed between clubs in Europe. There is no more uncertainty as to who will win trophies. The uncertainty is limited to who will get relegated across divisions. And I have prepared a couple of slides, I don't know if you can put them up, which make this point. There you are. So this is the first slide, looks into, if you wish, the frequency of participation of clubs in the knockout stage. So we divide the period from the last 25 years in 3 periods of 8 years, roughly. Now, for each sub-period, the clubs are ranked from highest to lowest participation. And if you look at the red dots represent the frequency of participation. So, for instance, look in the first period, 2000-2008, the 10 clubs with the most frequent participation account for 40% of overall participation. Now, when we were doing this exercise, we were struck by 2, if you wish, observations. There are a number of them. These are the two most striking observations, and they both concern entrenchment. First, the number of different clubs that participate in the group stage of Champions League, the same observation is correct for Europa League as well, is shrinking over time. It used to be 60 in the initial period, the top chart, 2000-2008. It has gone down to 40 in the second chart, and in the third chart, and we presume this is an irreversible trend the way things go. Now, this is it's not a small reduction, it's a reduction by 1/3. It's not inconsequential. Furthermore, if you look among the clubs that participate, there is increasing dominance of the most frequent participants. 3 clubs in 2000-2008 always participate. We moved to 4 in the second period. We moved to 5 in the third period. In the last period, the 10 most frequent participants account for 55 of all participation. Now, before moving to the second slide, let me say one thing here. Participation, of course, is not inconsequential when it comes to the point I made before about undermining the competitive balance. Because participating clubs, they have the benefit of direct injection of cash flow or prize money, but also indirect. I assume all clubs that play in Europe, I mean, I don't assume, we have evidence, they sign contracts which reflect this participation when it comes to sponsoring, TV money, and so on. Now look at the second graph. The second graph is the point that Miguel also referred to. And this graph shows a measure of uncertainty of outcome in all matches. This here we take the English Premiership, which is supposed to be probably the most competitive league in Europe. And if the observation holds here, as you can imagine, and we have the evidence, it holds in many leagues across Europe. Because we've run this exercise across a number of European leagues. Now, what this graph shows you is that in matches with, let's say, no uncertainty, they have a low entropy value, no uncertainty as to the outcome of the result. The early years are in blue, the later years are in yellow. Now again, 2 striking observations. The number of matches with high uncertainty falls by about 30%. The number of matches with little uncertainty increases. Look at the tail of the distribution in yellow, which completely covers the distribution in early years. Now, the matches with little uncertainty involve Man City, more than 120 matches overall, Chelsea, Man U, Liverpool, and arguably the biggest club in the world, Arsenal, which is in the range of 40 to 60. So what this graph shows is exactly the point I made before, that the system for deciding on participation that UEFA with ECA have jointly put together in European football does not only goes directly against their self-assigned task to promote the pyramidal structure, promotion, relegation on the merits. They have eviscerated the key dimension. Is the overwhelming majority of clubs cannot aspire to become champions or participate in European football.
Petros, can I just try to unpack this a little bit? So what you are showing through these 2 graphs is that there is entrenchment in the participation at the level of the European competition. You showed evidence for the Champions League. And then you observe, and that I think makes a lot of sense in terms of observations, that the counterpart of the entrenchment of participation in the Champions Leagues is the increased dominance of a few clubs at the level of the English Premier League, as you showed it. And you can see that these 2 observations are actually the mirror image of one another. I mean, you have always the same clubs that participate in the Champions Leagues, and those clubs end up being stronger, having more resources, greater ability to hire talent, and they end up dominating the...
self-reinforcing.
It's a self-reinforcing phenomenon, and these two observations are actually linked. Now, can you be a little more precise about the factors or the decisions, the joint decision by UEFA and ECA that have led to these dynamics such that indeed entrenchment is getting stronger at the level of the European competition and the competitive balance is deteriorating at the level of the national leagues?
So over the years, criteria for participating in the UEFA competitions have changed. Over the years, UEFA has employed different criteria and has compensated teams that, if you wish, come from leagues with higher, let's put it, likelihood to participate in competition. So over time, we see the big leagues in Europe be represented with more and more teams. So if I'm an average team, let's say in Belgium, I have to end up in the first two places if I want to end up in the UEFA competitions. But if I'm an average team, or a little bit more than an average team in England, I can participate if I'm one of the top 10 teams in one of the UEFA competitions. So this way, by compensating leagues which are commercial, UEFA incites the increased participation of clubs from the most commercial leagues, compensates them with additional money, and through other statutes makes it impossible for other clubs to catch up. What are the other statutes? Financial fair play. Because of financial fair play, clubs who aspire to participate in European competitions cannot overspend their income. If they cannot overspend their income, you can imagine they can never catch up with the leading clubs. And if we want to be intellectually honest, of course, players, both in Europe as well as in the US, they will choose their teams primarily, players will choose their teams primarily based on the financial compensation. So top talent is being attracted by the same clubs consistently, who participate more and more frequently in European competitions. They make more money to compensate their players, and so on and so forth, what Miguel referred to as a self-reinforcing factor.
Now, there is one aspect of this evolution which I think we need to address, which is the question of why this matters at the end of the day for the European consumers or for the fans that are sort of watching these competitions. Because what you're describing is a process through which there is indeed increased entrenchment, there is increased dominance, but we also see that the viewers are willing to pay for these matches, and in particular these competitions between these very strong teams. So why is it that there is a concern in terms of European competition law that is supposed to worry about the welfare of the viewers at the end of the day?
Is this a question for me or for Miguel?
Yes, sir. That's for you.
I can also answer, but you answer, Petros.
Well, there are two aspects to this discussion. One aspect of the discussion is how does this system affect the interest in football? The interest in football is not just the consumers, it is the consumers plus the potential investors in club. There are a number of historical examples in the United States where leagues have fallen and disappeared precisely because of the dominance of the league by a certain club. Actually, the whole discussion of competitive balance in the US rests on the historical example of a football league disappearing following 10 years of dominance by the Cleveland Browns in the 1950s. I wouldn't find it, let's say, unreasonable to see investors eventually take their marbles and go home if this thing continues forever. Now, as to consumers, Quite frankly, we have to be a little bit careful here as to what do we mean, first of all, by consumers, and they pay, who pays the money? The money paid primarily is through the TV rights, where the allocation of TV rights follows a particular pathway. I'm not so sure how kosher it is. And many consumers, I find, who are prepared to pay this money, they're prepared to pay this money to watch football, but the counterfactual, we will never know it. That is, what would be the situation and how much money would consumers be prepared to pay in case everybody had a day in the sun.
So let me sort of turn to Miguel now. What we see, or what you described earlier, is a potential concern in the European competition law. And as Petros sort of mentioned, what is relevant here is not only Article 101, but potentially also Article 106. Now, I mean, what potentially is challenged, however, is the internal organization of UEFA. It's an internal governance mechanism. It is the way in which UEFA has decided to organize itself together with ECA. Now, isn't that a novel application of competition law, in particular by comparison with what was done in Super League, which did not involve an internal process of organization of the UEFA?
Not in all respects. I mean, some, for example, some of the clauses that are in the Memorandum of Understanding, like the anti-suit clause, the non-compete clause, are clearly traditional clauses that the court consider as restrictions of competition and even restrictions of competition by object. So I think they're pretty obvious. But the real fundamental problem from my point of view, and I think it's very important to make this point and to provide the whole picture, is that what explains the adoption of these rules? So Petros and you in your work, you describe the impact in terms of encroachment and competitive imbalance of the adoption of these rules by UEFA. And what explains the adoption of these rules is the exclusive role of representation given to ECA, or now EFC, and within EFC, the dominant role of the elite clubs. And these two things are linked because the elite clubs can only have the dominant role that they have even within ECA or EFC because of that exclusive representation that is given to EFC by UEFA. That allows that elite of clubs to continue to control the EFC, and in turn then with the agreement of UEFA to control, not to control, but to have a co-decision, a shaping role in the rules that determine access, seeding, distribution of financial resources of European competitions, and that ultimately led to this. So basically, what this does is that we are giving to an elite of clubs that are the dominant actors in that market a predominant role in deciding the rules under which that market operates. And that's why I think that while your economic evidence clearly demonstrates that this ultimately produces a lot of anti-competitive effects, I think this is even a restriction by object, by giving. Because can you imagine in any other area of the market, a regulator calling the dominant economic actors and saying, well, we are giving you and only you the dominant role in deciding with us how we're going to regulate this market? I mean, this is clearly anti-competitive. And
so what you're describing really is a protection by the incumbent against the potential of entry.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, and that is something that is very similar to Super League, of course. Yeah. I mean, the incentive there to prevent the entry of an alternative competition is present here as well in terms of protecting the incumbents against the potential entrants.
And I just want to have something on the question of the consumers.
Yeah.
Because Petros spoke a lot about the European market, but let's think about the national market. The national market, the national leagues, I mean, as competitive balance decrease, uncertainty in the games decrease, this makes it less and less interesting for consumers, I mean.
Exactly.
And that we are actually seeing on the economic value of media rights of many national leagues.
Exactly.
So we actually see it, it's because consumers are less interested because the games are much less uncertain. So the value of this
I saw,
economic
for
value of
instance,
media rights
that the value of the TV rights for the Belgian top league is actually decreased in the
in Portugal, they are facing the same challenge now.
And that's a reflection of the reduction in interest for watching these competitions, which is consumer harm.
And it's very important to say this. These competitions then don't need to be organized this way. The rules could be different, and could be rules that will fight encroachment and promote more competitive balance. But they are not. Why they are not? Because there is this incumbent pool of actors that dominates through the power given to them by UEFA, how these rules are being set.
So as we come towards a close here in this panel, I guess a question for both Miguel and for Petros maybe in turn. What would you like to see done differently here? What would your solution be?
Well, I would like for there to be a more effective enforcement of competition rules. I think it's a mystery to me why European Union institutions haven't played a stronger role in terms of regulating sports, not only football, but there's governance flaws not only in sport. And I'm not someone like other people that wants to fight the autonomy of sports. No, I think that sports should continue to be autonomously regulated, but that this autonomous regulation needs to be subject to good governance principles that guarantee compatibility with EU law. And that's the fundamental thing, and that's not the case. And unfortunately, EU institutions, with the exception of the Court of Justice, and I would say even in spite of the constant incentives of the Court of Justice for EU institutions and the Commission in particular, I mean, it's the only area of EU law that I remember where the Commission is constantly second-guessed by the Court of Justice in its judgments. The Commission has assessed, it's very interesting, from Bosman. I mean, remember that in Bosman, the UEFA and FIFA went to the court and said, we agree this with the Commission. And the court said, it doesn't matter. The Commission is wrong on EU law on this matter. And constantly has been the case, and again with the Super League. The court went further than the Commission was arguing in the case, and the Council was arguing in the case. So it's surprising to me why it is, when moreover, and this is a very important point, and it's a point I think applicable to UEFA and applicable to EU institutions. The case law, and that's why I made that initial point that the judgment of the court on the Super League was not in favor of the Super League. If anything, and that's a point that results from my own legal analysis on this matter, if anything, EU law gives tools, instruments to EU institutions and to UEFA itself to fight the dominant role of elite clubs. It gives them that. So contrary to the usual narrative that sometimes perception, EU law is being used by elite clubs and UEFA is defending the European sports model. No, UEFA could use EU law to oppose the role that elite clubs have been playing. If it doesn't do it, it's because it does not want to do it. And they should explain why they don't want to do it. EU law gives them the instruments to oppose that role, to have much more, to work with principles of solidarity, to have a different mechanism of distributing and of determining access to competitions and distributing its resources. But then, why the EU political institutions don't do it? I think this is part of that vicious cycle. Because because the way the system operates, representation of the stakeholders is dominated by the elite actors, the diffuse interests of fans, of the overwhelming majority of athletes, of the large number of football stakeholders, these diffuse interests are not really represented by anyone. And because they are not really represented by anyone, EU political institutions are not getting the right incentives to understand what they ought to do, and they are afraid of intervening in this area. They actually think that UEFA and EFC, former ECA, probably represent what the interests of football are, when they do not represent. So this is part of the vicious cycle. Until we are able to break this vicious cycle, we will not have bodies in sports, in this case in football, that will put pressure on EU political actors to do what is necessary. And this is the difficulty, it's this vicious cycle in which we are.
Okay. Petros, did you want to come in on that with anything you see as a solution?
Two words. I don't know if I have a magic solution, but I think if we go back in history and think, relieve, if you wish, the UEFA's objective function, UEFA was designed to organize pan-European competition, and the institutional design of UEFA followed this function. Over time, UEFA moves into areas of business law, European Union law, free movements, competition, without altering its institutional design. And you need to have, if you wish, the expertise, and you need to have also the structure to address issues of public policy like free movement and competition. By now, we have ample evidence that UEFA is a haphazard regulator. I cannot, in my view, and it's not just a question of awkward regulations which make no sense intellectually, but it's also the points that Miguel mentioned, which are largely motivated by political economy. I compensate the big players who are my best customers. I can see myself no solution other than at this stage for the European Union to move and play an active role. This model of UEFA being a regulator / entrepreneur, quite frankly, hasn't worked. I would like to see the regulatory function be removed from UEFA and be assigned to a European regulator.
So what you're describing, both, is a situation in which UEFA is essentially captured by the interests of the large clubs.
Absolutely.
But what you also describe is a situation in which there is sort of little interest from the European institutions to actually play the role as a substitute regulator. So it sounds as if, you know, the next stage is going to be played in court again. Am I wrong in this?
I don't know if this is a 100% a watertight conclusion, because I've seen there are a number of mechanisms within the European Union that can help us move the discussion from Lyon to Brussels that haven't been exploited. I still believe that a lot can be done if a few member states of the European Union use enhanced cooperation to advance these ideas concerning regulation of football.
Okay, I think we have exceeded the time, so...
That was everything that I wanted to ask, and thank you to Damien for helping moderate, and Miguel and Petros for the really insightful contributions. Thank you, and I think we'll hand back over to Pien.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Time now then to turn to one of UEC's cornerstone policy initiatives, the Player Development Reward. This proposal aims to strengthen the football pyramid by rewarding clubs who invest in training, youth academies and player development. To present this initiative and explain how it could effectively reshape incentives across European football, please welcome back to the stage UEC President Alex Muzio.
Hello everyone, I'm back. I have to say, I'm a very positive person, and I appreciate that my speech was maybe not as positive as it could be, but that makes me very excited that I'm now here to present this policy to all of you, because I see it as an incredibly positive step for European football in many different regards. And as I mentioned in my speech, it has been received exceptionally well by everyone. And yes, I'm going to go Steve Jobs and start walking around. So sorry to the guys over there. I need the slides though, please. So this is the Player Development Reward. The idea is very simple. The idea is that at least 5% of UCC revenues goes into a large pot for player development reward. As you will guess from the title, it is about developing players. We kept it nice and simple. And these funds would be redistributed to clubs based on the minutes that their players have, that they had trained, played in European competitions, and the revenues that were gained by the teams that played in those competitions. Very simple. Only clubs from UEFA associations are valid, so any continents outside of Europe that train players are not entitled to this. And also, the only clubs that can receive this money, every club in Europe is valid apart from the 36 in the Champions League phase. Once you've taken those amounts out, we then redistribute again, but that's a little bit of extra complication that might be unnecessary here. So, that brings to why this policy and why is it so positive. So, there are currently two forms of solidarity for European football clubs. Transfer solidarity from FIFA, that is distributed based on where the player was trained, what years he was trained, and it is very simple, 5% of all transfer fees. Now, it has a real positive that it rewards clubs that develop talent. Ultimately, if you don't develop any talent, you won't receive, your players will not have any transfer fees, and you won't receive any solidarity. And if you develop the best players in the world, it stands to reason that, in general, those players will transfer for large amounts, and you will receive your solidarity. However, as noted here, it's outdated, unpredictable, and unfair. It rewards transfers rather than genuine success. And as we're in Belgium, a simple example, you have Romelu Lukaku, Kevin De Bruyne, Thibaut Courtois, all developed in this country, all truly outstanding, world-class football players. And in the FIFA system, Lukaku has rewarded his developing club much more substantially than the other two players, simply because he has been transferred more times for more money. Now, is he better than the other two? I'll leave that up to your own subjective judgment. But there isn't the gulf that you will see in the amount of solidarity that has been distributed. Now, then there's the UEFA club competition solidarity. It doesn't specifically reward clubs that develop talent. It is for everyone. It is simply a distribution mechanism. Now, that is a real positive for cash flow for football clubs, so that is a big positive. But the negative is, it doesn't reward you if you're the best or you're the worst at youth development, which is what we're all trying to encourage here. So, why is the PDR so much better than those two? Well, it has all the positives. It has the steady cash flow. You know when your players will be playing in European competition, you have a good idea of the revenue, and it's annual. And it does not have the drawbacks that the others do, in that it doesn't reward you in a jolty way. Big transfer, nothing for several years, big transfer, it's consistent. And it rewards you for developing talent, ultimately, because if you develop a good football player, it stands to reason that his club will very simply play more European fixtures and earn more revenue, and therefore earn you more revenue. So, we can see some examples, if my clicker would work. So we have some examples. So I know that this is mildly complicated, so I want to take you through one exactly. So this is Federico Gatti, apologies for the pronunciation, of Juventus. They received 74 million in prize money as a club. He played 801 minutes for them, which was 8.1% of the club's total minutes. So, if 5% of the revenue is distributed to, as we propose, then these clubs here would receive what for them are substantial amounts for having developed a player of his caliber, of his talent. And as noted before, if he was never transferred for any transfer fee, despite being an exceptionally good football player, they would never receive any FIFA solidarity for transfers. Here are some other examples, just to give you a feel for how the policy works and for what sort of teams and players would be rewarded. We've had very good feedback from players themselves, from John McGinn directly, that he felt that this would be a very positive thing for rewarding the clubs that trained him. These are examples from last season. And some more here. Even goalkeepers count, so that's good. And you can see lots of different clubs, lots of different levels. Obviously, Denzel Dumfries, that would be a significant amount of money for his former team. Fucking thing, man. And again, this is from the Club World Cup, because we also believe that it should be relevant there as well, probably more relevant there than anywhere else. And maybe then you'd actually get some solidarity. Hey, that'd be nice. So, in our simulation, data provided by Transfermarkt, if the 5% that we requested was distributed, these are the sort of amounts that you would be talking about. Bear in mind, of course, as mentioned, no Champions League league phase teams are entitled to this. So these would be amounts that would be distributed on an annual basis based on the way that the players have performed for their clubs. Even Bury down there with 15,000. That's that.
Okay, our next speaker represents the European Union's highest level of policymaking in sport. Since his appointment as European Commissioner for Intergenerational Fairness, Youth, Culture and Sport in December last year, Glenn Micallef has played a key role in advancing the EU's approach to sport as both a cultural and economic driver. He has been an advocate for transparency, sustainability and social dimension of football, ensuring that Europe's most popular game continues to serve its communities. Please join me in welcoming Commissioner Glenn Micallef.
Hello, Alex, dear friends from the UEC and colleagues. Well, football, which is the sport that everyone in this room and millions of Europeans love, is in danger of just becoming a business. And I was hearing the conversation just a couple of minutes ago. We now speak of fans as consumers. We speak of clubs as if there were business organizations. And I have a bit of a problem with this. I'll explain. To me, football clubs are an essential part of our communities. And yes, every club must manage its finances, and every club must meet its obligations on the balance sheet. This is necessary, and this is normal as well. But a football club is so much more than this. It's a place where careers begin. It's a place where players, coaches, and technical staff come together, sometimes professionally, and sometimes purely out of love for the game. But they do so always as a team that fights for each other on the pitch and off the pitch. You can say that they become a family as well. For volunteers, our sports clubs in Europe gives a sense of purpose. From setting up cones to staffing kiosks, giving up their time, it matters to them. They feel like they belong, they contribute, and they connect. For parents and for children across Europe, clubs create lasting memories. Driving kids to training grounds, cheering at matches, sharing time away from screens and digital media, making memories that last a lifetime. And for fans, For France, clubs are the heartbeat. It's part of their identity, and week in, week out, at home or in stadiums, they are part of something, they feel part of something bigger. Singing, cheering, celebrating together, building communities. And this is exactly why football matters for well-being, for culture, and for society more broadly. And this is exactly why football is more than a business. To thrive, especially when we're talking about smaller and medium-sized clubs, I feel that 3 pillars are essential. First, a strong local community, which is the soul of every club. Fans who attend, volunteer, and carry the club in their everyday lives. Second is good governance. Leadership that balances financial side of football with social responsibility. Investing in players, staff, and facilities to remain competitive, without forgetting that the community is an essential part to making the club successful. And third, a strong squad. Players who embody the club's identity, who work hard, who inspire and represent the community with pride. In men's team, in women's football, but also in youth structures. So 3 pillars: community, governance, and team. And these are the foundations of every successful football club. And then, no club can succeed in isolation. Football needs a healthy ecosystem. An ecosystem that promotes integrity, transparency, and fair competition. An ecosystem that invests in grassroots, in solidarity, true solidarity between larger and smaller clubs. And one that safeguards competitive balance, so that ambition and hard work can determine success. At the heart of all this continues to be sporting merit. On the pitch, results must matter. Effort, vision, and performance must be rewarded. This is what keeps football honest, exciting, and unpredictable. And this is what keeps fans or consumers connected. And here, public authorities also have a role to support clubs and communities while respecting the autonomy of sport governing bodies. Because autonomy is what ensures credibility. So support must strengthen, not undermine, what makes football unique. And this is why I want to focus my intervention today on good governance. First is inclusive dialogue. Decisions about football must be open, transparent, and participatory. Small and medium-sized clubs, fans, associations, players' unions, all these have a voice, and all their voices must matter. Inclusiveness cannot just be a slogan. And second is honesty and accountability. As European Commissioner for Sport, I have made it very clear that I will speak my mind on this. I am here to represent those who love sport, even if that means taking uncomfortable positions or accepting the risk of being criticized. Defending the integrity of football means being honest, even when honesty is inconvenient. So honesty obliges me to say, something is deeply wrong when decisions by global regulators of football, especially decisions concerning player welfare, are taken without the largest players' unions even being present at the table. As shocking as it sounds, this is precisely what happened in Rabat just a few days ago. And as football lovers, as guardians of the sport, we cannot remain silent about this, no matter how powerful the organization involved may be. At the same time, I fully recognize that the organization that I represent, the European Commission, also has responsibilities to shoulder. Whether it is ensuring the correct implementation of the treaties or EU law, or assessing who is eligible to participate in our sectoral social dialogue, we must fulfill our obligations. Because only when those who represent players, clubs, leagues, and regulators are all properly at the table can the best decisions be taken. The decisions that allow the sector to thrive, to grow, and to innovate. And speaking of these challenges, we cannot ignore the impacts of ever-growing match calendars. As someone who loves football, I can't believe I'm saying this, but there is such a thing as too much football. Some competitions simply make no sense, not from a sporting perspective and not from a sustainability perspective. Their impact on player welfare, on competitive balance, and on national leagues is far too great. And they raise serious questions about the blurring of lines between regulators and operators. Lines that must remain clear if governance is to be credible. All these challenges and the potential negative impact that they can have on society make strong, transparent governance all the more essential. Because threats like the Super League, which was, is, and will always be a bad idea, have not disappeared. And we cannot afford to be complacent. On this, the European Commission and other institutions like the European Parliament speak with one voice. This is also what the European Parliament recently reaffirmed, which is the need to protect values-based sporting models rooted in solidarity, fairness, and sustainability. And this is a view that the European Commission shares. On a more positive note, Europe has something that no one else has: the strongest football ecosystem in the world. Talent from everywhere looks at Europe. Fans from every continent wear European club t-shirts and gear. And this is in part thanks to our strong systems, thanks to a regulator which I believe has its heart in the right place, supporting solidarity between smaller and bigger clubs, protecting football from destabilizing forces like the Super League. And on these issues, we must stand firmly with them. On other issues, we must speak constructively on areas where we feel that improvement is needed. The European Commission will continue to contribute, and if you care about football's future, we have a public consultation which is currently open on these issues. And I urge you to make your voices heard. And then I want to end with a personal reflection. I have now been commissioner for almost a year. In that time, I have spent many hours listening and speaking to stakeholders across the football world and in the sporting world more broadly. Most of the time we agree, and sometimes we disagree as well. And that is fine, because disagreement is a sign of passion, of commitment, and of people who genuinely care about sport and football. Our goals, however, are common, and they're shared. We want an open and inclusive governance model where players are protected and where football is preserved and promoted for generations. To achieve this, I believe that we must stick together because we are strongest when we collaborate. We don't always need new regulations. We don't always need new laws. What we need is unity. Standing together with our communities, ensuring that our voices are heard, so that the game continues to inspire, so that it continues to unite, so that it grows stronger, and so that Europe can be proud. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
time for a quick break now. Hopefully you've enjoyed the last hour and a half, some really insightful conversations there. So 15 minutes for a quick coffee break, and then join us back here as the forum will continue. Thank you very much. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Next up, we are focusing on another very important policy initiative, the UEC's domestic media rights protection. This proposal seeks to ensure that leagues and clubs can preserve the value of domestic broadcast rights amidst the unrelenting expansion of international competitions. Once again, please welcome back to the stage Alex Muzio to present the next step in the UEC's vision for sustainable football.
Thank you. Thank you. I promise this is the last time, so enjoy it while it lasts. So, this is our new policy that we are unveiling today. As you will have heard from my welcome and the speech, we believe that there are substantial issues coming for European leagues, domestic leagues in general, where the UEFA rights are rising, even plateauing would be still dominant versus domestic leagues' rights, which are generally declining, especially from national associations 5 and below. Now, again, as the background to this, it will not be explicit here, but the biggest clubs in those leagues, they're also fighting for more and more, and that will, again, lead to disparities within the league. So, our policy is that, our proposed policy, I should say, unfortunately not enacted yet, would be that if a country spends more money on UEFA club competition rights than its own domestic league, then a percentage, 35% is what we've calculated, of that surplus would be set aside as media rights protection. Now, how those funds would be redistributed, we would distribute them to the relevant national association to help preserve competitive balance. So instead of, again, the top teams in the leagues going further away because of their UEFA money, it would be more evenly distributed. So you can see here, already in 30 national associations out of 55, UEFA rights are higher than the domestic rights. We anticipate that this will be a growing trend rather than a current situation, and that that number will only increase, not decrease. So we're also noticing as well, of course, that UEFA competitions are treading on domestic leagues in terms of the calendar, in terms of availability of dates, in terms of everything of that nature. Now, here are some examples. Again, our policy, when it comes to policies at the UEC, is to keep them as simple and as understandable as possible. So it's very straightforward. In France, as it stands, they spend approximately 480 million euros on UEFA rights. Now, there is an asterisk here because, of course, we do not know at the moment what the summation of the French television rights will be. We have probably done a slightly optimistic estimate, I would suggest, which would lead to 80.5 million being redistributed. As you can see in Sweden, the ratio is even more stark, where it's around 4 times the domestic rights deal. And in Ukraine, even more stark again, we're going to 24 times. And the idea is very simple. The idea is that you redistribute to that league to balance out the league in some way. Here are some other leagues. And again, the total is 208 million is the planned, but that would be for now. As I note, we see this trend going only in one direction, and as such, that amount would only increase over time rather than decrease. At the moment, 30+ leagues would benefit from the policy. These are the biggest ones, and on the next slide is the others, which I will leave for now. I would like to add before I go that I presented a policy earlier that is very positive in terms of youth development. Now, it should be noted that as it stands, Union Saint-Gilloise, my club, has historically not had a tremendous academy. We're working on it, we're working to improve it. But as it stands today, what would happen is we would give up 5% of our Champions League revenue and we would receive essentially €0 back. In this, I believe that we will regularly qualify for European competitions as a club. And again, this policy would be costing my individual club money rather than gaining money. It's important that stakeholders in general can propose things and be genuine actors, that sometimes things are more important than their individual personal interests. And these two policies are clear examples for myself. Here are some other countries. You will see the amounts might not look big in the grand concept of European sport, but for the Maltese League, 770,000 distributed for between each of their other clubs would be a very reasonable part of their budget. So again, this is the amounts today, 24-25, and we would anticipate there would be more leagues in the future where this would happen and would be a problem, rather than less. And that the amounts would also increase as time goes on, given the way that domestic rights are generally declining, whereas UEFA rights are increasing. So that's the idea. Last from me today, relax.
Thanks, Alex. Thank you, Alex. You can relax now. Job's done. Right, time for our second panel of the day. And this takes on an important question facing our game today. Should European institutions play a stronger role in regulating football? As football's governing bodies further consolidate their power and their boundaries between operator, regulator, and commercial actor become even blurrier, many are asking whether the era of sport's full autonomy has reached its limit. So, to lead this discussion, please welcome back our moderator, Ali Walker of Politico Europe, plus Jan Exner of Charles University, Jan Zaglinski from London School of Economics, and Giorgio Guazugli Marini, Head of European Commission Sports Units.
Thank you again, Pien, for the introduction. Welcome to the panelists. On the first panel this morning, I think we heard a bit from our speakers about how they thought possibly the European Union should take a more active role in helping regulate football and potentially other sports. And I think that's the question, or one of the questions we want to sort of get into today. The game could be said to be at a crossroads at the moment. We've seen divisive or disputed competitions brought up, the Super League, the Club World Cup. We've heard panelists and speakers today talk about the growing power of a few elite clubs. They all sort of raise the same issue: who really governs football and whose interest do they do it in? So we'll dive into that a little bit more here. We'll wonder whether the EU should create some sort of European Sports Act to regulate football, a legal framework that would bring together fairness, transparency, representation at every level of the game. And we'll ask, does football need that, or can it manage without one? So I'd like to start with a question for Jan Exner. If we look back to the Super League case and the recent Club World Cup, these sort of proposals don't happen in a vacuum. In light of the controversies that both competitions engendered when they were proposed, do you think football can claim to govern itself effectively, or have we reached the limit of self-regulation?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us. Well, I think that the developments since the Super League judgment show one thing quite clearly. Football's self-regulatory model is no longer functioning in a way that protects the broader interests of the sport. Just look at the Super League, the ISU judgment, the Diarra case, or even the Serang case from this summer. They all revealed kind of structural problems that we identify in our proposal. For those of you who are not familiar, me, Jans Glinski, and Steve Wedderell from Oxford, we drafted a proposal for a European Sports Act, a regulation imposing minimum good governance requirements on sports organizations. And we look at all the problems, a concentration of regulatory, commercial, and disciplinary power all in one hands, with too little transparency, too few checks and accountability, and no effective measures when the governance fails. And we believe that these are not isolated apples. These are systemic symptoms. Because if football governance would be functioning properly, the courts would not be called to correct it every few years. Yet we see that football clubs and other stakeholders increasingly have no other choice. Let's just look at the complaint against the FIFA match calendar or the new Club World Cup. That's just another example. A massive commercial value with huge sporting consequences, adopted with no real transparent consultation, benefiting only a few richest clubs. So this is precisely the pattern that we discuss in our proposal. Decisions with huge economic and EU-wide impact taken by private bodies with no real limits. And the recent events there, they just reinforce the picture. I mean, let's just look at the dissolution of the FIFA's own Human Advisory Board, concerns about the 2034 World Cup attribution, or repeated warnings to governments, do not interfere. I mean, it just shows that self-regulation is used as a shield against accountability, not really as a tool for good governance. So the question is, can football still self-govern itself? And my answer and our answer would be, well, not in a way which delivers what the European sport requires. Transparency, good governance, stakeholder representation, integrity. So self-regulation works only if the good governance is credible. And today, we believe that it no longer commands trust. So this is why the litigation keeps escalating, and this is why we have national regulators trying to intervene. And we believe that what is missing today is an EU-level framework, like not to micromanage football, no, but to ensure that the autonomy of football governing bodies is earned through good governance. So we believe that the European Sports Act would give us exactly that. Predictable, clear, accountable rules for human rights, stakeholder representation, and other good governance requirements. So in brief, to answer your question, sorry I was so long, I believe that self-regulation has reached its limits, and the question is more about what replaces it.
Don't worry, I think that was very succinct and a really insightful opener to the topic. I'll come next to Jans Glinski. In your proposal, you argue that without EU intervention here, sports governance will remain unrepresentative, will remain untransparent, potentially resistant to reform. Do you think that momentum for change is building at the moment? Where would you see that momentum coming from? And do you think sport, football in this case, is open to change?
Let me maybe start where I don't see momentum coming from. It's the governing bodies themselves. Alex referred earlier today to those famous photographs, the white sheets outside the Rolac. Remember, that was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we still believed that a genuine self-correction, reflection process could take place inside FIFA and other federations. And I think 10 years on, no one is under that illusion anymore. So there's a growing consensus that external intervention is necessary. And here I do actually see a lot of encouraging developments. The first is a growing number of countries have started to regulate sports. France, a few years ago, has adopted a law aimed at democratizing sport. Spain has just overhauled its National Sports Act. The UK, of course, has the flagship initiative in the sector, the Independent Football Regulator. The Polish government has announced it's going to look into sports governance. So this is really an avalanche of regulation. Not just in Europe, mind you. Australia, India, South Korea, Mexico have all taken steps because they understand that self-regulation is over. We need to make sure that sport, football in particular, abides by the values we want it to abide, and it's been captured by certain powerful actors from the inside. So this is one thing. The other thing is that we see a lot of, I think, quite promising initiatives within the world of football itself. And that's quite important in my view, because we can't have a genuine reform of the game without support from the inside. The fact that we're sitting here as part of this forum at an organization that's representing clubs, that's aiming to increase democracy, solidarity, good governance in football, that's remarkable in and of itself. I don't think 10 years ago we would have thought this possible. FIFA is becoming an important actor. They're calling out FIFA, UEFA, national associations on some of the problems they've been causing, overloading the match calendar. Individual groups of players have been active, voicing their concerns about environmental protection, about the women's game. Some national associations as well, think Norway. Interestingly, even agents seem to be on board when it comes to reforming football. But probably the most important stakeholder, in my view, inside football are the fans. The Super League saga, I think, really gave them a sense of empowerment. It showed them that, they can affect change. And I don't say too many good things about Bayern Munich, but I will say that their fans at the latest Club World Cup, to show that amazing banner, FIFA is more poorly governed than it was 10 years ago. So this message is arriving in the terraces as well, and I think that's quite meaningful. Just as a final point, of course, the EU itself is in a moment of reflection, and I think that's quite encouraging as well. So the past years have seen a lot of resolutions, reports, communications from every single major political institution of the European Union. The European Parliament's resolution from a few weeks ago is very, very explicit and more direct than ever in calling out all of the failures of football governance. So I think there's movement, there's momentum. There's probably more momentum, actually, than in a very long time, possibly ever. And just, with my academic hat on, there's a lot of scholarship showing that regulation tends to follow crises. When a sector proves incapable of handling its own affairs with negative effects for its own members, but also for society more broadly, the political process tends to step in. And that's, of course, what we're seeing in football, right? The past decade and a half was a phase of perma-crisis, if you will. So better regulation, EU regulation, might go a long way to improving the state of affairs.
Thank you, and I think that's a great moment to bring in the EU. Giorgio, does the EU have the competence, and maybe, as our first panelist suggested, does it have the political will to regulate football? And would the proposal for a European Sports Act be fundamentally any different to existing mechanisms that do sort of govern professional sports?
Thank you. Thank you so much, and good morning to everyone. And I have to say, while I do fully respect the analysis and the comments and the opinions of people, in this room and in the stage, I would be a sort of a party pooper in that sense, because
that's good. We need to introduce some debate.
To introduce some debate. I would try to be sort of without being too preaching and pedagogic, but I think from a technical point of view, the European Commission, the European Union, has a limited competence in defining sport policy at European level. The Article 165 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union assigns only a limited role to the EU, and also limited tools to incentivize the development of a European dimension in sport, and limited legal tools also to achieve this goal, and notably only at recommendations level. I understand that there are ideas to actually go and propose regulating sport through different legal bases, through competition law articles. But at the same time, I would like to stress the fact that one thing is to actually regulate sport by being guardian of the treaty. This morning I heard the speakers mentioning that in fact the Commission has been silent, has been not being very active. On the contrary, the Court of Justice has played his role. Well, the Court of Justice has a role of being guardian of the treaty, making sure that the treaties are respected, but not about defining a positive, having a proactive role in implementing a policy, implementing a sport policy. When it's about implementing a sport policy, it's about implementing sport policies on both dimensions. This morning we have very much put the focus on the fact that there's threat that football is becoming too much driven by economic, commercial interests. But I'm being provocative here. The moment the Commission and the EU starts regulating, it cannot only intervene in the economic and commercial area. So the downside of the coin would be that immediately there could be criticism of the EU abusing their power to actually adopting a regulation which goes beyond the economic dimension, beyond the competitive angle, and goes into a governance system which is more relevant to the specificity of sport with a social value. I don't want to be too technical, too legalistic, and I'm not a legal expert. I would be very uncomfortable in this situation, but we see, unfortunately, maybe a too much optimistic analysis in saying, well, the Commission could intervene and solve the problems. Having said that, we are not at all, we don't want to hide and undermine the challenges that affect sport governance at the moment. So we do want to use the fact that we consider that it would be difficult to intervene in a regulatory way, not to play a role in helping, and the Commissioner today actually really, it was not the first occasion he showed real commitment in trying to put oil in the machine, to try to solve the big challenges that affect football at the moment. So I'm trying to be brief, but I'm turning into the political side. So from a point of view, political level, I don't think, leaving aside the technical, legal aspects, we know that a regulation can be initiated by the Commission, but then it has to be approved and endorsed by member states and by Parliament. Parliament is actually very much expressed with this report an intention to intervene and help. But member states have different realities. Member states might have different positions, and might, as you were saying, might go forward in adopting their own regulations, which could then become conflicting with a possible European regulation. So here we are just saying, not to mention the fact that a regulation would regulate the EU member states, hypothetically, but not the European geoscope of what is European football at the moment. So I see some elements, just to put some doubts on that. I don't want to actually really be a party pooper and completely undermine the work, because it's genuine work that tries to find solutions to a problem that we see. So politically, I think the Commissioner mentioned inclusive governance. Yesterday, I was also in a meeting where I heard the speech of the president of the International Olympic Committee, who was saying, We only work if the last element of the chain performs well. We perform as good as the weakest element of the chain. So this means recognizing the value of an ecosystem of football as a whole. So to answer, I would have some doubts on intervening with a regulation in this area.
Okay, well, we're going to bring Jan and Jan back in now, I think, because you've outlined sort of three proposals for how this could work in your thinking, and I wonder if you could maybe talk the audience through what those proposals are in brief, and which one you think is maybe the most realistic in light of some of the caveats that Giorgio has thrown up.
Should I actually maybe start, or should I start with the proposals and then you jump in on the? So yeah, it's. We've been having this conversation in a friendly way for a while, so it's good just to take this to the next step. So ostensibly, I'm now thinking, if I were in George's shoes, what could I do? Now, so there's three options ostensibly. So the first is cooperation. We have informal or formal agreements with some of the stakeholders here. We're going to help them financially to achieve certain things. We're going to incentivize the game to move in a good direction. This is the easiest thing to do, but it's also the least effective. We are in the realm of soft law, of non-binding measures. And a classic example is the European Union's agreement with UEFA, which, if you read through it, has beautiful rhetoric. Let's promote good governance. Let's strengthen gender equality. Let's do something for financial solidarity. But of course, it's a paper tiger because none of this is enforceable, so UEFA doesn't have to comply, and it doesn't comply, right? So the next step is litigation, and here the idea is simple. Let's just bring court cases. This, of course, is the latest trend in football and sports across the world, and it has one big advantage. This is binding. If you feel you have been wronged by a federation or association or any other actor in football, you can bring a court case today or tomorrow. And if you're right, the European Court of Justice will give you an enforceable ruling. Now, this is good, this is better, but it comes with a big problem. It's all ad hoc and it's all unpredictable. We don't know who's going to bring these cases and about what issues, which makes governing really, really difficult. We want to talk about training compensation now and financial solidarity. Well, tant pis. Currently, there's just cases on sports arbitration and agent fees. So it's interesting to hear earlier that the UEC is considering legal action on potentially solidarity payments. You know, the problem with that, though, is it's a bit like whack-a-mole. You solve one issue, but you know how poor football governance is. You'll be litigating for half a century until we get all of those problems sorted. And this is really why we are so firm about legislation being the best way out here. It's predictable, it's coherent, it would create a regulatory framework that takes out some of the uncertainty also from the sector. No one wants to be in court all the time. You know, David Squires from The Guardian calls it lawyer ball now. We would have EU legislation that sets out some ground rules, doesn't interfere too much, but sets out some good governance principles. And I think it can be done. Again, we don't want to go into the legal technicalities so much. The European Parliament has recognized it can be done. Article 114, the internal market competence, is there. There's cross-party consensus on including that in the resolution. So I do think we're kind of moving on with the debate, and you know, as our proposal says, this is probably a good way of just kind of getting a bit more out of the sector and improving governance standards.
No, you're right. I would just like to follow up on that by commenting a bit on the diverging national regulations. But let me start with the premise. We name something a European vision of sport, but that's not something new. That's something that we already have foundations for. I mean, if you just look into the case law of the Court of Justice that we've been discussing, if you look at the member states' legislation, if you look at the parliaments and ministers' resolutions, they all mention the same things: integrity, open competitions, solidarity, stakeholder consultations, and other principles of good governance. And in our proposal, we show that these are not just abstract ideals, that they are already there in national legislation. But the problem is that national regulations on sports governance are fragmenting. I mean, Jan already mentioned, France imposes governance requirements. Spain tries to strengthen athletes' representation, athletes' rights. Poland is moving towards gender quotas. Germany and Sweden retain club ownership rights. So there is different regulations, and in our opinion, this proves two things. Member states, they have both political appetite and constitutional basis to regulate sports. But second, they are doing so in very different ways. And they create divergences that unfortunately increasingly affect both competition and investment across borders. So this is why we believe that the European action, that the European vision of sport is not only achievable, as Jan mentioned, but it's also necessary. I mean, if national regulations continue to develop in different ways, we end up with structural fragmentations, different ownership rules, different good governance standards, different levels of athletes' protection, and nobody really wants that. So the European Sports Act that we've been proposing, we believe that it can convert the diverging national practices into a shared minimum standards of good governance, not too much intervention, as Jan mentioned, but minimum standards on governance, human rights, and athlete welfare. Of course, that member states would retain their sporting traditions, but also their constitutional identities. But the European Union would ensure that, for example, gender equality, fan representation, and other good governance principles do not stop at national borders. So the beauty of the models that Jan outlined is that they all build on something which already exists nationally, but they do not reinvent European sport. They rather harmonize the floor than the ceiling. So, yeah, we think that should be done.
May I
you want to come back?
Yeah, just a tiny thing, because Giorgio, I think, quite rightly pointed to the political dimension of this. Can this be done? And I think none of us have ever denied that this is a challenge. It will forever be a challenging project. But I need to insist that the idea that this is categorically unfeasible is just plain wrong. I am based in London, and in the UK we've been told for 6 decades that football regulation couldn't be done. Impossible. Guess what? As we're speaking, up in Manchester, they're setting up the offices of the regulator. So, you know, the right idea at the right time with the right support can be a very powerful thing. You, all the club executives, need to keep on pushing for change. Don't underestimate the voice you have within the leagues, federations, but also governments and institutions like the European Union. Use that voice with determination, and let's make change happen.
Little round of applause there.
Appreciate it.
Giorgio, we'll come back to you. What sort of scope is there within the European Commission's current mandate for practical steps that could increase accountability or transparency in football governance? And on top of that, are there lessons from other EU-regulated sectors that could apply, do you think?
Yeah, well, indeed. I mean, the fact that, from our point of view, there would be challenges in going towards a one solution fits all, meaning a European Sports Act. This doesn't mean that a series of concrete actions could not be taken. At the moment, we are in a sort of an inception phase, in a consultation phase. We are as a Commission, we support the Commissioner Micallef in trying to gather ideas, concrete initiatives that would, in a way, contribute to make the difference. And we are looking in different areas. I mean, we look at what member states are doing, and also in UK, other countries are doing. The form of a regulation is one thing, but it has to be decoupled from the initiatives and the ideas that that have been promoted. So in terms of establishing bodies with a regulatory function, but not necessarily maybe via from the European Commission or from the European Union. These are ideas that could also genuinely come out within the process of a good, inclusive governance, self-regulating. I'm not so pessimistic about the idea that the current governance has proven complete failure. So we are still thinking that, for example, this morning we saw excellent proposals from Alex, and there are concrete steps towards improving from within the system. So we are now looking into other areas, in competition area, in energy, in audiovisual, to see whether there are some elements that could be taken on board, and perhaps now in these months we are testing, we're technically investigating, but these initiatives could come out in the communication that the Commission plans to adopt at the end of next year. So we would like really to give a concrete contribution. On the other side, I think that at a political level, we would like to try to also use influence as a Commission, as institutions, to bring all the players around the table to try to come up with concrete, good solutions, because I fully agree with Jan. I personally, I have full respect for of course, for the Court of Justice, for the right for everyone to address the litigation systems, but I personally do not believe that this is a sustainable way of governing the system. So I would hope that by having also a strong constructive dialogue, inclusive and concrete good ideas, then the good ideas convince a lot of people. So it's also about believing a little bit more on this good old system that needs to be reformed, but it's still the ecosystem we have in place at the moment.
Maybe we could just bring things to a close with a quick fire round I'd like all three of you maybe to take a swing at this question, but what would a hypothetical EU Sports Act mean for professional football in particular? Jan, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think it would, well, people say I am optimistic. Some people even say that I am naive, but that's who I am. So I believe in positive things, and I believe that the European Sports Act could help reinstating trust in football. Because we've been discussing governance problems, self-governance problems, and I agree that sports governing bodies should keep working on improving internally, but we also see that they keep failing in that. So it calls for an external action, and we believe that the European Sports Act could help, not by replacing FIFA or UEFA or by centralizing football here in Brussels, but by drawing a clear line. Autonomy is conditioned based on good governance. And if you want to regulate football, you need to meet the European standards, transparency and other good governance principles. So in brief, I would say that imposing these minimum good governance standards could increase the trust in football, which would help all of us in the end.
Jan, and then we'll give the last word to the European Commission.
Should I just go? Yeah, so We need a political debate. We've made a proposal. It's a good proposal, we think. Take a look on your way back. But obviously, there's other ideas that merit consideration and should be taken seriously. I think it's key, though, that we have a set of rules on good governance, including democracy, transparency, accountability, representation, better protections for clubs, including financial solidarity mechanisms, better rules for athletes, mandatory representation, but also health safeguards, as well as better protections for fans. And I think if we can get there, the impact on the world of football will be significant. On the one hand, we'll see concrete changes in behavior. Imagine a world where if a president exceeds his term limits of his mandate, we can actually stop him from doing that. Or when a group of elite clubs just hoards TV revenue and doesn't want to share that with smaller clubs or clubs further down in the pyramid, we can force them to do that. Or when athletes and fans are being denied basic protections, we can help them bring those cases to court or to a dedicated agency. These are the types of things that would improve. So I think that's meaningful. What might be even more important is that we get a kind of change in thinking. Football would no longer be the place where everything goes, where federations, elite clubs, and their commercial partners can just do as they please. There'd be ground rules on good governance they have to comply with. Violations would have consequences. Sanctions would be there. So we can, fight for all of those values that I think almost everybody in the room probably shares, but do that in a concrete, tangible, and effective way, and not just, kind of at academic conferences or policy discussions which articulate them but don't find effective ways of enforcing.
Thank you.
No, I could not agree more. These are important discussions, and the timing is right. The timing is right to really come up with ideas that try to address a big worrying problem in football. And so for me, we welcome the fact that there are indeed ideas or to try to overcome the stall in which we see at the moment football is, and also to prevent worrying trends that might go even worse in the next years. From our side, I have to also admit that it's important from the Commission side also to look at not only at football but other sports. And in that sense, though, we see that challenges faced by football are becoming big challenges also in other areas. So what I think it's important, and again, it's a message that want to pass again, let's use these next months to continue putting forward ideas at Commission level, because there could be a momentum to, without raising too much expectations. From our side, it's also important to call for responsibility for all the stakeholders that are involved in the football ecosystem, because at the end of the day, football belongs to all the stakeholders, and the more we manage to have a converging views and to have a democratic principles that are underlying the governance system in football in Europe, the better. So I am convinced that discussions like this and solutions like this can only be beneficial for us in this moment as a Commission.
Giorgio, Jan, thank you very much for that discussion. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Vi. Time for our final panel now, which turns to the fundamental question: how do we keep football competitive and connected to the community? As we know, the European model of sport is built on solidarity, openness, and the belief that success on the pitch should never come at the expense of sustainability and local identity. But today, we see widening financial gaps, increased governance frictions, and a continued concentration of power at the top. So, to discuss this, please welcome our moderator, Matteo Zacchetti, Policy Officer at European Commission Sport Unit, and panellists James Hill from Norwich City Football Club, Claudia Schäfer from the European Leagues, Oki Gotlich from FC St. Pauli, and Omar Chowdhury from 21st Group. Okay.
Okay, that's good. So, thank you, Pien. And actually, it was a pleasure to be introduced by the sister of a former player of my team, Sampdoria. So that was really a privilege. So, well, as this panel is about the social impact and the social importance of football and the importance of football in our societies, I would like to start by thanking again our Ukrainian friends for making the trip here and being here, because I think it was Arrigo Sacchi that once said that football is the most important of the least important things. But I guess football is very important also to people in difficult situations. So thank you so much. So let's start. We have a fantastic panel, and I would like to start with James. So Norwich is, was founded in 1902, so long history of commitment to its community. At the same time, you play in the most global possible league. So how do you work in order to keep your fans engaged and actually to protect, your sort of audience from the attraction that other big clubs might have on your fans?
Firstly, just want to say thank you to the UEC for inviting me to speak on behalf of the club today. And it's a real privilege to speak amongst so many esteemed colleagues from within the industry. So, yeah, the issue of community is super important to us as a football club. Our mission statement is to make our football club better tomorrow and our community than it was yesterday. So really focusing on that's an important thing for us. We are in Norwich the only professional sports team, let alone professional football team in Norwich and the county of Norfolk, and our nearest rival's 45 minutes away. We are a county of 900,000 people, so we've got a really large captive audience. But given how global football's becoming, how strong the Premier League is, it's a really important task for us to see whether we can make sure the next generation of supporters in the region want to be Norwich supporters, not supporters of the top six. So one thing that we're working really hard on at the moment is making sure that actually we do things which attract the younger people within our region to be Norwich fans. We currently have 20,000 season ticket holders out of a 27,000 stadium, which is really, really good. But we recognise that they're getting older, and we need to make sure that the next generation of fans and new supporters are coming to support us, and the same accounts for businesses in the local community. And one thing that we commissioned recently was an economic impact report in relation to the impact we have on Norwich and Norfolk, and it found that our gross value added to the community was £88 million a year. So just for context, if you were to take Norwich City out of the equation, that's the hole that will be left in the local economy. So we have a really big contribution. The same goes for our Community Sports Foundation. We contact and have 45,000 unique participants every year for our programs, and that adds a value of 66 million, and that would be 66 million that the local government, national government would have to spend on delivering the same impact to communities. So making sure that we can focus on that is really, really important. We're working on a strategy at the moment. We've got this concept called Home for Everyone, which focuses on mental health, inclusion, accessibility, sustainability within Norfolk and us as a club. And that's what we're trying to do to try and make sure that we're properly contributing to our community. And it's not something that we do just for the brand or the revenue it brings or developing new supporters. We do it because it's really important to us as part of our ethos as a community club. And any benefits that come alongside that is great, but we obviously want to do the right thing for our community, so that's a real important thing. And we think it's a differentiator which will build that connection to our local community and ensure that they want to be Norwich fans rather than fans of other clubs.
Yes, thank you so much. And I think you have the oldest song that has ever been written in football. Is that
Allegedly.
right?
Allegedly. Not necessarily the best.
Allegedly, okay. So
I won't sing it.
let me move to my right. For Omar, I have a question for you. You are from 21st Group, so you have a strong focus on data-driven decision-making and insights in the commercial value of maybe your football partners from federations and broadcasters. So I wonder, we talked a lot about competitive balance. We discussed that within, for example, within domestic leagues. We know that there are leagues that have a higher competitive imbalance than others. So how do you see, this competitive balance element adding to financial value of leagues? And also, how do you think that this can drive fan engagement and therefore long-term revenues?
Yeah, it's a kind of critical question, I suppose, to how value is created in sport. And our work focuses on the intersection between the sporting product and commercial value. And if you think about how value is created in, not just in football, but in sport more generally, there's kind of three things that fans get out of bed and watch football or sport for. The first is quality. Like we're all inspired by, professional athletes doing their thing, competing against each other. The second is jeopardy. Sport delivers genuine uncertainty of outcomes, and that's what excites us. And the third is connection. If we've got an emotional investment in the sport, then we've got more of a reason to care and more reason to watch it. And so competitive balance really speaks to that second pillar, jeopardy. To have jeopardy, you need to have some level of competitive balance. And if you look at some of the most successful sports properties, football globally, outside of football, the two highest on a per game basis are the NFL and the IPL cricket. So on a per game league basis, they're the most valuable sports properties. And they are the two properties that are the most committed to competitive balance. When you watch a game, you don't know who's going to win. Going into a season, you don't know who's going to win. Going into next season, you have no idea if that's going to be related to how the previous season has gone. And they've been able to drive unbelievable value from that. If you look at, if anyone's a Formula One fan, when Max Verstappen was winning every single race, viewership, tickets just fell off a cliff. Like, fans want to watch games, races, competitions where they don't know what's going to happen. And football is no different on that. If you look at the most successful domestic leagues or the overachieving domestic leagues are the ones that tend to have more competitive balance. And even the Premier League, which is obviously held up rightly as a league that has had perhaps more competitive balance than others, at the back end of last season, where there was a large degree of certainty around who was going to win the league and who was going to be relegated, viewership tailed off. So competitive balance is, if you go back to quality, jeopardy, connection, it's kind of hard for football to shift quality. It's the most meritocratic sport in the world. Every kid almost wants to be a footballer. Connection's hard to shift. There's great narratives, great stories, but jeopardy is like the one big long-term value driver within football that the sport should focus on.
Thank you so much. Very clear. And actually, okay, Claudius, my first question for you is about your work that you do at European leagues. But first, let me ask you, would you have imagined at that point of the season to have Thun at the top of the Swiss league?
For sure not. That shows how we have competitive balance in our championship for the moment.
Yes.
For the moment.
Well, okay.
No, but about the European leagues.
No, yes. About the European leagues, my question is really, because of course you are an organization that has to keep together the interest of big leagues, very big leagues, smaller leagues, and also very, very small leagues. So how do you address all this apparently interest that could be conflicting, and how do you manage to advance?
Listen, since many years we have the same mission, and it is still the same. It is to enhance and protect competitive balance. It's as easy as that, even that is very complicated. And I think the most important thing is before asking from big organizations, international organizations, things we have to see, to control, to check if we are doing it in the right way. And I think this is something we do because we have all the data when we check our national competitions. When you see how distribution is done in the national competitions, we have a big portion of solidarity. When you see the distribution in the domestic leagues, when you see the ratio between the first and the last club, it's around 1.8, maybe 2. So something that we are asking in the international competition is something that we have in our competitions. And just to give you an example how that works internationally, we just can take the example of the Club World Cup that was played in summer, where 2 clubs, Chelsea and Paris Saint-Germain, received the same amount that now more than 3,000 clubs should receive. Alex, you just told us, and that's the truth. We still don't know how it will be distributed. But just the fact that 2 teams are receiving the same amount as 3,500 clubs, something is not working in the system. And for sure, you can also take, in the end, the UEFA competitions. You can take the example of Napoli that was mentioned in an article that I read. Season 24-25, Inter Milan with around 150 million made out of the Champions League. Napoli didn't play international this season, 800,000 euros. So there's a big distortion, a big financial polarization, and this is something that we really have to not only look into it because we are aware, but that we have to fight. And we just had last week a board meeting of the European leagues, and we decided really to concentrate ourselves in 2 topics in the end. That's the financial polarization that we have to fight, and the governance, because it's very much linked, the 2 topics.
Yes, absolutely. So let me turn now to Oke from San Pauli. San Pauli is a legendary club for its activism, for the social responsibility that you've always upheld. I heard somebody saying that San Pauli is not a club, it's a way of life. So maybe you can tell us also if it's true. But I mean, at the same time, you demonstrate that sporting success can live together with these impacts that you have on your local community and society. Can you explain us a bit how you do it? And actually, before I forget, congratulations for being the vice president of the German Football Association and recently elected board member at the German Football League.
Thank you very much, and welcome, and thank you for inviting us, because we are speaking about us at St. Pauli and not about me. And this is one very important thing, because we are from scratch a community-driven football club, and this means involvement. And I heard a lot about stakeholders, and this is a term I don't like at all, because we are not speaking about stakeholders so much. We should speak about fans and people. And this is why I'm really wanting to put the focus on the regulators in European Union to really think about not whether there should be changes or not, but how and in which timeline, because we need these participation of fans and community in every single association, and we as associations, whether it's the German ones or others, are not speaking to the people, which in the end, like the data shows as well, like to have being involved are the ones which are not consuming, but being passionate about a sport which is uncertain. And how we are going to keep that, there is this German thing about the 50+1 rule, and I'm really wanting every EU commissioner knowing that this is an important rule to really tackle one main thing. It's not about only who is, what about governance and who is stakeholding, it's about the money flow. What's happening in football in Europe and in the world at the moment is trying to make a sport certain, trying to make a sport unplannable, trying to drench out my investment and get more out of it than I put in, which is a complete, it's an interest which we can all agree on to a certain extent, but it shouldn't be on the back of sports where uncertainty is the one which is even the economic driver of the sport. And therefore, I really would like to point out that for the survival of the sport, we don't need domestic rules. For the survival of the sport and who is winning and keeping the uncertainty, we need regulations. We need many regulations, and we need them by an overall body and not by the associations, not by the clubs themselves or the single countries. And this is an important thing to make people still believe that the sport is of interest and that the sport we want to keep fresh and keep young people being involved rather than on video games and any other things, but being in the movement and being activists, because we at St. Pauli speaking about our people are activists, and this is what drives the community. This describes your question, what is the lifestyle? We want to move things, to the better, and this is where regulation is needed. And again, it's not about whether or not, it's about how and how fast we are doing it, because otherwise we are ruining a sport where young people don't believe in anymore, people and fans don't believe in anymore, and then we only have video zombie generations which are being on social media and not being together in a stadium and so on. And therefore, my take, please, please, please help us in regulate the sport. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I think I'll stick with you because, Bundesliga is very successful, but Zweite Bundesliga is equally extremely successful in terms of audience, in terms of participation of fans. I wonder, in Germany you have this 50+1 ownership model, and we discussed today that ownership model, it's really one of the issues that are being discussed and that are at stake. So do you think, for example, that this principle that you have in Germany has an impact, can contribute to competitive balance and also long-term sustainability?
You know, it's very funny. So first of all, at the moment we are playing first Bundesliga and don't want to go back second Bundesliga, even if it's, I think, the 5th or 6th most successful league in Europe. It is about 5th, and this is really, the question is really good, because yes, you have a 50+1 rule in Germany, but then of course there is the next step about money distribution and about all the discussions we have on the European level, Alex was pointing out, but we have them on the national case, of course, as well. How are we distributing money? How is the money shared between in the German case, 36 clubs, and of course, with the need of the 5 big ones or 6 big ones competing in the European tournaments, and on the other side, the lower ones trying to compete in the National League. And so I'm always having fun and saying St. Pauli and Bayern Munich have the same problem, but on a different stage. Bayern Munich wants regulations as well because they want to compete with PSG and Man City. We want regulations because we want to compete in the national league. So therefore, again, we need the regulations to keep the sports a certain uncertainty, a definite uncertainty, and to make it happen. And 50+1 is not a rule which makes everything great. There are obstacles, especially when it comes to cartel and European competition rights. And again, because this uncertainty on the law side, we need to have European regulations to say what is possible and what not. And my wish is, if I could give this to the commissioners, please think about a special status about the cultural good of
not only football, but sports. It's a cultural good, and you can do regulations on a cultural good in the same way like foreign trade services and agreements you are trying to do. Please put this in consideration with the cultural good of sports, please.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, now we don't feel any pressure.
Yeah, okay.
It's nice. So let me go back to Claudius. I mean, one of the big issues, and we know that it's something that it's really important for not only for leagues, but for European leagues definitely, is the international match calendar. You mentioned the Club World Cup, about the impact that it has on competitive balance in terms of the distribution of money, but also, I mean, the calendar got really, really packed with that. So we also know that you filed a complaint with the European Commission together with FIFPro against FIFA. But I mean, what would you really, how do you see the best possible scenario for European leagues? How would you divide the international match calendar, between the domestic level, the European level and the international level? So,
in fact, first of all, just because of this complaint, that was not an easy decision to go against FIFA. And we are not questioning FIFA as the regulator. We're not questioning, we don't want money from FIFA. We just want to sit on a table. We have a 20 billion industry with the European leagues, and we are not sitting at the table. We are not in the bodies that they are having the decisions. And I think this is the main topic, and this is we will fight for, but we have to do it really smart, and also find all arguments. And I think the legal arguments there on the table. What we heard this morning, all these legal arguments, I think we have them not since 1 year. We have them since a longer time, but we tried to focus on discussion, to have proposals, but in the end they were always neglected. And I think this is something that has to change. And if it doesn't change, then let's wait a decision. So I would be quite confident in the end to have a decision where at the end our industry, you don't like the expression, the leagues with their clubs, all the clubs sit on the table, because if not, it will be devastating. I think we are at a turning point, and we see this clearly when it comes, for example, to the TV rights that was mentioned also by Alex. Yeah. We see it in Switzerland. I can give you an example. We have the same broadcaster, UEFA competitions and our Swiss competitions. They were the first going to the market. This broadcaster paid a lot of money. And then you still have the rest to pay to the National League. And that happened not only to the Swiss League, it happened also to other leagues. And these are facts. These are facts. And that's why we need to have a change in the distribution system. We can talk about solidarity, 2% more. Just in 2016, it went from 5 to 4%. Okay, we're having discussions, European leagues. I think we did a good job. We're on 7%. But if we want to have a change, we need to have a change in the whole distribution system. Yeah. Because, again, take the Swiss case, because I know it quite well. The money that we gain more now from solidarity, from this 7%, and when you compare it to what we receive less in TV money in the Swiss market, in total, it's less than before. It's less than before. And sorry, that was not the objective. That's why we really need to sit on a table. And just a last example of governance, because I don't know if people are aware, in the end, even that with UEFA we have some good discussions. Who sits on the table when there are the decisions? We have the club competition committee, we have the leagues, we have 1 seat, 1. Then you have around 15 clubs. You have some UEFA delegation. And this body is proposing the decisions to the ExCo, where I'm sitting at. And then, you know, it will be never a decision against the club competition committee. So you see where the power lies, and I think that is where we need to have a discussion, maybe not only a discussion, where maybe this FIFA claim will help us.
Okay, yes, and then I think as the Commissioner reminded today, at some point, too much football is really too much for everybody. I think, you know, okay. Omar, well, we heard today about, I mean, we're talking about financial solidarity, and we heard about the solutions that Alex explained, you know, that very innovative, the player development reward, but also the media rights. I mean, you have, you know, you work with numbers. So do you think that such solutions would help financial stability and also, you know, sort of long-term sustainability of clubs and football in general?
Yeah, I think there's always a danger with redistribution of it being seen, and even the word solidarity almost speaks to like charity, as if it's like doing out of the goodness of your heart. And I think there needs to be a bit of a reframing of what distribution means and why we do it. And I think what good distribution and redistribution looks like is distributing based on where value is added within the ecosystem. And there's kind of two, I guess, stakeholders, or two people that drive a lot of value. The first is players. So that speaks to the system Alex described earlier. And the second is fans, and trying to create an ecosystem where value is distributed to those that create players and create fandom. Creating players has been discussed, and it's an obvious one. You know, if you're a small club in wherever and you produce, you know, a world-class player, you should clearly have some kind of reward for that because you are contributing to the value in the system. Fandom is sometimes a bit more intangible, but domestic leagues clearly play a part in creating fandom. And you can see this in other sports to a degree where, you know, the reason the NBA is more popular in, say, Spain than the UK is because Spain has a domestic ecosystem in basketball that the NBA has an interest in fostering in order to better develop players and better develop fans. And the same principle could apply within European football, where FIFA, UEFA, any kind of big, even the Premier League, benefit from the value that a Swiss league generates, or a Moldovan league, or whatever league it is. And so distribution mechanisms need to essentially recognize where that value is, and I think move away from the concept of solidarity stroke charity, which is how it's, I think, described at the moment.
And when you're saying this is important. The redistribution of money is not about giving charity to one or another club. It's about the main topic. How can we drive the competition interesting? And in NFL, the managing boards are always looking at one question first. How have the results been, and have they been interesting enough to their public? So means, have they been narrow enough and not having just one winning all over the time and winning on a high extent? And how are we driving this? And this is the need for redistribution to keep the competition in balance, make it more interesting, and then create passion, more fans. And we're always speaking about fandom, and when it comes to full stadiums, we are not seeing all over Europe full stadiums, yeah? And how can we drive this passion and bring people to the sports and potentially being, I don't like this word as well, TV consumers, but
Thank you. Let's go back to James. Well, Norwich is a community club, we said, but you also managed to get some excellent results. You were third in 92-93. You won 2 League Cups. And actually, I think you are the only English club that won in Munich against Bayern. So, but I mean, how would you say that the lack of competitive balance, I mean, you play, we said, in the most powerful league in the world, I would say, football league in the world, how that affects a club like yours? So do you think, I mean, being able to have to play, you know, more often and be in the top 5, top 10 more often would change the nature of your work, the nature of how you relate with your fans, or not?
I think we're quite a good example of the issues with competitive balance within England. So for those who don't know, we're in the EFL Championship, which is the second tier, so below the Premier League. And we've recently been promoted in the last 6 or 7 years now. 18-19, we won the championship, got relegated bottom of the league the next year, then went up in 2021, top of the league, won it at a canter, then came bottom the next year. If you look at the recent seasons, the 3 teams that have been promoted from the championship to the Premier League have gone straight back down, and the gap between the team being relegated and the team that's safe is growing year on year in points terms, which suggests that there's a growing disparity between the 2 leagues. And going to the point of competitive balance and making a kind of a compelling narrative, if you know the 3 teams that are going to be relegated each year, it kind of takes that away, and it's seen as the exception rather than the rule for a team to stay up. And I think, I can't point to any examples, but I get the sense that those either cliff edges between leagues or disparities within leagues are mirrored across European football. So really the key from our perspective is how do we find a new model which recognises the contribution that the bigger clubs have to driving revenue within football, whilst adequately ensuring there's a fair distribution of those funds to make sure that the teams that are a bit smaller have more of a chance at competing, whether that's bridging the gap between the EFL and the Championship, or whether that's actually competing within a league itself. And obviously one of the big things that's been spoken about briefly today and is a big issue in England is the independent football regulator, and that has a mechanism in place whereby the regulator can intervene in the distribution discussions between the EFL and the Premier League. Now, the chair has made it pretty clear, and politicians have made it clear, that they want that to be a last resort, and they want the leagues to find a decision between themselves. So if we ever get to the point down the line where the independent regulator does step in to make a decision on whose final offer is better than the other, that's going to be a long way down the line, but the hope is that that can focus the minds in the discussions, and actually we can get to a point where we do get that fair distribution. And going back to the point which Omar made earlier, I had a talk last week from UEFA where they looked at the kind of benefit of the new Champions League model and showed the TV rights, TV viewing figures between games where it went down to the wire and where a team was 3 or 4-0 up at half time. There's a huge drop off. And we all want to see exciting, compelling games. We all want to see the little team go on and succeed. We had a brilliant example in England with Leicester coming from nowhere to win the league a few years ago, and everyone all over the world was speaking about them. We want more of those stories rather than less of them.
Thank you. Thank you. So I look at Dennis, for the time. So thank you very much. I think was a great conversation. And let me for just a second to step out of my role of moderator and also maybe my European Commission policy officer. And I would just like to thank Alex, Dennis and Gareth, for the passion you put in this project. As a football fan, I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you. Just to let you know, this next part is going to be in Spanish. So if you would like Spanish to English translation, you can put your headphones on and you'll be able to get that as well. It's channel 1 that you need to get the Spanish to English translation. Okay. No worries. Whilst Javier is getting mic'd up, I'll just do a quick introduction of him as well, because we are almost at the end of the event and we're about to be joined by a leader whose influence on European football goes far beyond the boundaries of Spain. As president of LALIGA since 2013, Javier Tebas has been a consistent advocate for strong governance, financial responsibility, and the defence of football's competitive integrity. To share his reflections on the path forward for European football, it is our honour, and please join me in welcoming Javier Tebas. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to try and be as brief as possible, but I think it's been a very interesting session today. Lots of things have been said, and I think it's worthwhile offering a summary and offering certain conclusions and valuing what's been said. First of all, we need to thank, because the content today has got us political sports content. Well, first I'd like to thank Alex, the chairman of the UEC. I would like to thank him for being a chairman, as we say, as he said, for the Union Saint-Gilloise. They won the Belgium League. They played in the Champions, and that is a lot of work, and he dedicates a lot of time also to the UEC. So I'd really like to thank him and his brilliant ideas that he has presented today, because his ideas are brilliant. They're not just ideas, they are brilliant ideas. When we're talking about the broadcasting rights and also the players' development reward, and also I know that the European Commission has had certain ideas, but what was remembered today that Alex presented his idea at the UEFA. And what was the answer at UEFA? It's not the right time. I think you heard that. You know, there's a lot of brilliant ideas that are presented to UEFA, but it's never the right time to present them. Why? Because it's not right, or it's not suitable for some person or some people to allow someone else to lead different ideas and different decisions. But they're both very interesting when we're talking about the broadcasting rights, because this reflects a very serious problem that we are seeing in European football, because there's a big distortion currently. The national leagues, where the majority of you all compete, so there's a big difference between the clubs who play in the European competitions with the revenues they get compared just to what they're doing. But we're not just talking about the broadcasting rights. The new Champions reform means that there are more matches at home, which means you get more money from your box office, you get more sponsorship, and that offers more distortions in our competitions, in the leagues, and in all competitions. So the big leagues suffer this a lot, but maybe we don't suffer it as much as the smaller and medium-sized leagues. But in general, the national leagues or the domestic leagues have a serious problem, and it's growing. I'd like to thank the UEC, Dennis, Gareth, and I'd like to thank the clubs who are members of the UEC, because you have survived, and I'm using the word as you are survivors of pressure, very unusual strategies for you to abandon your project. But you have known how to continue, because it's very, very important for the UEC to continue. And that the strength and the power that you all have, Gareth, Alex, Dennis, and the clubs, you need to be there to help football. The football that helps clubs, and the clubs need to be defended so that our sport doesn't die off. You know, for some people, this is the elite or super elite sport, but the sport could deteriorate and die off, and I'll explain that now. So thank you all very much. Now, compared to the other sessions, and so with a lot of respect, I would like to say that I've seen this film before. I've been, in football for 12 years. I didn't join, the Liga by chance. I started in a very small club. But a lot of clubs in Spain decided that I was to be the president. But I've seen as president, the film that we've seen this morning. the distortion of national leagues. I'm going to give you an example. In the year 2016, the Champions reform, just before Javier became president. So the ECA, or whatever it's called today, signed a Champions League reform. I said back then, in the European League meetings at that time, that we were starting to go along the path of a collective suicide. And if we didn't start fighting, that would what happened. I was called to be totally alarmist. They said, it's not suicide. Suicide isn't immediate. It is the beginning. We're beginning along the path that could lead us to suicide. And so now I'm seeing, as I said before, I've seen this film before, but now we're getting to the end. Because different things have happened, the new Champions reform, Club World Cup. The ECA is getting more power when we're talking about broadcasting rights. And this is what happens in a film. But of course, all films come to an end. So how long to go before the film ends? I don't think there's a long time left. We're in the last phase, unless we react, of course. We cannot just sit and wait for the European Commission to do something. Well, I'd like to, but there's no time for that. I think they can intervene. I have doubts, but I think they can. I'm not going to get involved in politics, but I've seen the European Commission get involved in things if they've wanted to in the past. You know, they've even changed governments in specific countries due to their opinions. So can they get involved in this? Of course they could get involved. But anyway. But is there time? I have serious doubts that unless we're quick, we won't be able to solve this. I heard Claudius to say, I liked his conversation today, and he's really well defined the problem. But where is the problem? The UEFA doesn't sit around the table and negotiate. They will never sit down the table and debate. They have never sat around the table and they never have and they never will. They won't change. The UEFA won't change, nor will FIFA. We have to be very clear about that, or else we'll come to the end of the film very soon. Or at least we're in the last part. The problem for people who've been a long years in football will know that all the decisions that are made on the political side, all the broadcasting rights distribution, there's no looking back. Once they've been taken, it's very difficult to change things because, you know, when the clubs, especially the big clubs, have decided how they're going to manage the broadcasting rights or when they're receiving a lot of money, are they going to change? So what are you going to say? Now I'm going to get less? This isn't going to happen. Things won't change. So everything that we are seeing in this last part of the film is going to be very, very difficult to change. I'm very clear, and as our European Commissioner for Sport said, and I've had a controversy over the last few weeks with him. In fact, it was actually quite fun, to tell you. I think I enjoyed the controversy. I'm sure the Commissioner has good faith. Our Sports Commissioner has good faith. I have no doubt about that. But I do think he's more naive than my teenage children. He talked about honesty and the recent meeting in Africa of these pseudo-unions with FIFA to talk about the problems. And he said, no, the unions have to be there, and the leagues. But he forgot to say the word leagues. Talked about the threat of the Super League that continues to exist. Yes, that Super League threat continues to exist. And we have to think that when we're talking about football regulations, the European Union can't regulate football by itself. It has to regulate sport. And we have to think about that always. But the second sport in Europe, basketball, are now getting a Super League together. A Super League, which is absolutely identical in the way it's set up, and as far as the sporting side, as the 2021 Super League that threatened European football, this time with the NBA, with the FIBA and FIBA Europe's permission. They are organizing a competition and they're announcing it, you know, like 12 teams that are permanent and the other ones that come from the European leagues or national leagues. That goes against the European sports model. So if the European sports model has been defined like it, or the declaration of the 26 states, which I think was done in May 24. But I haven't heard the commissioner talk about that. And he didn't criticize the FIBA, the NBA. Well, it was important for us to be able to play a match in the United States. It didn't come off. But this is more important because if this comes off, it means the way to the Super League is left open. I said this just now. In sport, when things are done, it's very difficult to change things. You can't look back. And the people who are behind this basket league, the league, like the Super League, are the same person who led the Football Super League. The same people are behind it. So what they've done, they've got a whole set of ideas together and they're behind it. We have to realize this, and this is one of the big problems. So we need to face it, because otherwise we're going to be killed off. So what I would like to ask you all, and say that a lot has been talked about, but we have to be aware that the biggest asset that we have from our competitions, i.e. the leagues, the organizations and the clubs, is competitiveness. The competitiveness is a tangible asset, but it has a very high value. With this competitiveness, the Bayern Munich and Real Madrid have made records, Football Club Barcelona, with the competitiveness of our competitions over the last few years. And so, these are compete in the national leagues, but with other different clubs, and there's been uncertainty, so there is competitiveness. Let's defend this uncertainty in our competitions. If without competitiveness, there is no passion. Our fans don't feel passionate. Our fans, my friend from Sao Paulo, I don't know where he is, but I heard him earlier. The people are not viewers, but they are fans that watch our clubs in a different way, but they still suffer if the team wins or defeats. Obviously, the ones that go to the stadiums have got more feelings, but the ones sitting at home are still fans. A lot of people can't travel to the stadiums to watch the matches for physical reasons or for distance reasons or whatever. For whatever reasons, or maybe their parents went to live in Madrid. I'm from Huesca. Well, my children watch Huesca on the television, but they're real fans of Huesca, like the ones that go to the stadium. I've seen them cry for Huesca, but they watch it on the television. And they're real fans. And I'm sure that probably bigger fans are the ones that go to the stadiums. They're not spectators, they are fans. Let's defend our competitiveness. This asset is dying. This film is coming to an end. We haven't got a lot of time to go. Let's defend the UEC and also the boycotts that they cause. I know that within the ECA, there are a lot of clubs that would like to be in the UEC. But the glamour, and not to confront what is politically correct, means that they don't feel they can be in the UEC, but we don't care. We are obliged to maintain, as I said at the very beginning, at least we have to make sure that we keep the embers lit so that the fire keeps going, and we need to do all this before our film comes to an end. Thank you very much.
Javier, thank you very much. Thank thank you to everyone that's contributed to such a powerful and forward-looking conversation today. Decisions made in Brussels and beyond will not just define the competitions of tomorrow, but the culture and the values of our game for years to come. So before we wrap up, just a quick word on what's to come next. You are all invited for lunch in the foyer where we can continue conversations from today, a little bit more of an informal setting. I'm sure a lot of you will still want to discuss further what you've heard here on the stage today. For members of the media, the press conference will begin at 3 o'clock in this room. And for all UEC member club representatives, please return here to the main room at 3:30. That's for the UEC General Assembly. And then finally, of course, don't forget to mark your diaries for next year. We'll be returning to Brussels for the next UEC Football Forum. That's also on November the 17th. So on behalf of the UEC, thank you again for being part of this really important day. The UEC is not just an organisation, it's a movement for fairness, balance and sustainability. And of course, it is a call for football that is democratic, open as well. And hopefully that vision will come to life too. To make that vision real requires partnership. We need Europe to stand with the UEC, to protect the football pyramid, to reward development, and to ensure that our sport remains a shared cultural asset, not just for the very few. We ask you to carry this message forward into your clubs, your institutions, your conversations. Now is the time to act for the future of European football. Thank you so much for joining us here this morning, this afternoon, and for believing that our game belongs to everyone.